This is a stage that all companies at some point get to when you want to really grow your audience base, when you really go global. At some point, you get to a stage where you really need to look at your resources and, what you have available to you. And in order for you to expand your outreach, you need to do things in a different way.
Hello and welcome to the Multilingual Content Podcast, where experts discuss international content management, product localization, and global expansion. Today, along with our founder, Nicola, we have the pleasure of speaking with Veronica Di Martino, the Localization Manager at Eventbrite. With years of experience in building and scaling successful localization programs, Veronica has developed a deep understanding of what it takes to expand a company's reach in diverse global markets. In our conversation, she will share her valuable insights on navigating the complex challenges that emerge when adapting a product for international audiences. From cultural nuances to operational complexities, Veronica will walk us through the strategies and best practices that can turn these challenges into opportunities for growth and success on global scale. So, let's dive in.
Hi, Veronica, and welcome to the Multilingual Content Podcast. How are you today?
Hi, Nicola. Thank you for having me. I'm pretty good. Thank you. How are you?
I'm pretty good, yeah, as well. And today we're going to talk about your journey at Eventbrite, the localization journey, went and all the challenges and how you overcame them. But before we start right on the topic, would you mind introducing yourself to the audience so they know who you are, what you do at Eventbrite?
Sure. So my name is Veronica. I am a localization manager at Eventbrite. I lead the localization function. And basically, we look after the overall localization process of our product for our international markets. So everything outside English-speaking markets.
Okay. And can you walk us through your journey of starting a localization program at a major company? What were the initial challenges you faced?
Sure. So basically, I was coming from a bit of a unique circumstance, especially last year, where it was clear that the resources that we had available needed to be looked and reviewed. And especially because the company was ready to scale up and expand globally, so that we, that Eventbrite is really committed to gather people in the live events globally all over the world. And, our mission is really to empower the live events basically all over the world. And that meant that we really needed to look at our global footprint. And it was clear that we were ready to, finally expand again in a very meaningful way. And the resources and the processes that we had in place up until then basically weren't working anymore if we really wanted to go global. And, this is a stage that all companies at some point get to when you want to really grow your audience base, when you really go global. At some point, you get to a stage where you really need to look at your resources and, what you have available to you. And in order for you to expand, your outreach, you need to do things in a different way. So at that point, I was working as an individual contributor in the company as a solo localization person, basically. And it was clear that in order to expand and really reach audiences all over the world, we needed to start thinking outside the box and really expand our views and the way that we were doing things. The main challenge was that it was just me. So we were very limited in resources. I didn't have a team available. We had a very kind of skeleton structure, and therefore things that way are not scalable. You need resources, you need structure, and you really need to build from the ground up if you really want to expand and grow, basically. But the very unique circumstance of this story is that I actually was coming from a previous stage of my localization journey where before I had a very solid team, and therefore we had many processes in place, we had tools in place. I wasn't coming, from scratch. I didn't have to build localization operations from zero. I had a very solid foundation to, build from. And that's what really allowed to grow and scale in a faster way, in a more lean and streamlined way, because the skeleton of the localization infrastructure was there, has been set up there before me. And so I had all these like processes available, all these tools available. I just didn't have like the human resources and the people to lean on to in order to grow, basically. So that was kind of like the starting point and the main challenge to start with.
And as you began to scale up, what were the key milestone or indicator, the signal that it was time to expand your localization program? Like what signals did you understood that it was time to make that step?
Yeah, definitely looking at my day-to-day, looking at how, like I was actually like spending my work day and how much time I was dedicating to each initiative. So like gauging the level of effort, like understanding the level of effort that you are making and investing into each one of the initiatives that you're involved in is a very good indicator of, okay, am I feeling too stretched out here? Am I missing like maybe technical resources? Am I missing, is there like any lack in the knowledge or in the experience? I think the best indicator of when a company and a team especially, or an individual is ready to like expand and grow is the gaps and the blind spots. Where you see that you're missing out, when things are not working as good as they should be. So maybe like the transition quality is dropping or the time to market is slowing down. There's like technical issues coming up. For example, like a very, very clear example was that we had a technical backlog. So like internationalization issues that basically kept piling up at some point. And it was clear that we needed technical resources. We needed an internationalization engineer because we really needed to refine our product. We really needed to just fix bugs and make our product feel more relatable to the local audiences. And therefore, that's it's a no-brainer. That's where you need to bring new people in. That's where you need to bring fresh expertise, fresh knowledge in, and just like new resources overall.
Sorry, just to clarify, when you talk about internationalization, can you clarify a little bit? What do you mean? Like if it's like looking at the code, what is it exactly? So people can understand like what kind of profile will be needed for that.
Yeah, sure. So I'm not a technical person, so please excuse me if my explanation is not super technical. I'm not an engineer, but internationalization issues is everything that doesn't relate to the actual linguistic aspect of a product or a service. So it's not a translation error. It's not a linguistic, maybe like a stylistic or a linguistic issue. It's something, and sometimes it can be actually functional as well. So imagine an action button, right? Where you have to click in to register for an event in this case, right? Imagine the word for register for Germany, maybe it's very, very long and doesn't fit in the action button. So that would cause for the text to break or for the text to be not readable. And therefore that compromises the customer experience. And it also prevents from the basic functionality of the product, in my case, that you're offering. That is not a fix that can be resolved by a translator or like a localization person, but you need a technical person that can go inside the code, manipulate the code, and fix it in the way that, for example, that text box where the button lives is, big enough, long enough, or just can keep can hold the length of the full word. Other internationalization issues are maybe broken time zones or like the wrong currency is displayed because the code is showing the currency from a different market. So it takes a different level of effort, but it can really cause disruptions in the service basically and in the product.
Yeah, I mean, I think that clarifies what it is. And sometimes it's even maybe you don't get all the strings that needs to be translated. You don't get all of them. Some of them always stays in English, and figure it out. Why is that? You need somebody technical to look at the code. And
yes. Oh, there's so many of them. I feel for the engineer. They're like really amazing people.
And when you started scaling up, how did you prioritize which languages and markets to target first?
So the best way to understand how to prioritize which markets to go in, which languages to expand into, is just looking at your status quo and maybe perform an audit of your product or your service as things are at the present moment right now. Just looking outside of your audiences, who is your audience? Who is using your product or your service organically right now? So just like understanding what is your like persona, your like customer persona, and then from there, expand from there. So once you know who are the people that are using your product or your service, that's where you can really expand. And then really start to reach out to them, create a connections with your users, maybe send out surveys, maybe definitely do researches in the local markets, explore what the competitor landscape looks like. And those are like very, very important and insightful informations for you to then understand even more what is the value of your offer. Like, what are you bringing to these users that makes your brand and your product very, very special to them? And then how can you expand from there? I think, yeah, definitely look at how things are in the present moment. They will give you like so much insight in regards to, again, what user persona uses your product or your service, and then expand from there. And researches, like partner up with like local researchers, forge connections in the local markets, because they hold so much knowledge that sometimes we tend to just like overlook and oversee because we're just not in touch with the local users.
Makes perfect sense. Absolutely. Yeah. And it's always difficult to strike a balance as well, like between a global and a strategy and local adaptations, and making sure that it's relevant. It doesn't just feel translated in the target market. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. That's always the tricky part.
And I mean, I know especially a company like Eventbrite, but in general, there's like a lot of moving parts when you talk about localization. And can you give us some insights into the technology stack and tools that you use to support your localization program? Like, how do you manage the strings? How do you manage the assets? If there's any like automation in there or anything in general, just to give an idea, like an overview of what is needed, like from a, let's say, tools and technology side of things.
Sure. So at the moment, we have two different transition management systems. One is used for our product UI, and basically it performs at an agile process. So basically, strings for translation are pushed and pulled every day. Our translators access our translation queues every day, translate the content that has just been freshly pulled, save it, and then basically the process is completely automated where when the developers are ready to push the feature live or like launch release, basically make the release, then all the translated strings will be live after 24 hours. And we do this on a daily basis. It's really automated. It's like a really well-oiled machine thanks to the many years of partnerships with our partners and our amazing like engineers. And that's for like product UI. We also have another transition management system that hosts our marketing content and our help center content, and is also used for like ad hoc translations. So, sometimes it's like, the good old file sharing, and sometimes, it still happens. Our support hub and our marketing content, also those are automated together with, and they're fully integrated with the content management systems that our content authors use. And so I guess a good piece of advice is that sometimes you really need to like slow down to then accelerate. And it takes a while to build a good infrastructure, just as it takes a while to build like a good team and for everything. And eventually you will ramp up operations. Eventually you will accelerate, and time to market will get quicker, and you will start delivering transitions in a more efficient way, in a more cost-effective way, faster. But you need to be okay with slowing down first and really be patient with the early investment, all the investment that you have to put on early on and the time. And it won't be fast. It will be rocky. There will be blockers along the way, but it will be worth it. Long term, it will be worth it. And like in a year from now, you'll be launching new markets. In like 3 months, you'll be translating all sorts of content in like 2 weeks. It takes, sometimes I have to like say that to myself, remind that to myself, you have to slow down in order to go faster.
Yeah, it makes sense. I mean, once you have the infrastructure and something tested out, especially if you start with some markets, and then you can apply what you learn from that experience to the, let's say, next ones, that makes definitely things easier down the line. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's
true.
just difficult to start with.
I think, I like you need to slow down first before you can go faster. I need to, I don't know, print it and put it in front of me as well as a reminder.
Yeah, especially working in tech.
Yeah. So when you said you had to slow down a bit and then you started scaling up again, what strategy did you employ to regain momentum and scale up after you quieted down? Let's say you slowed down a bit. What did you do exactly? And what advice would you do to somebody who want to scale up that you learned from that experience?
Yeah. So once you have your foundations laid down and your groundwork is like really strong and solid, so you have all your tools, now you have your teams, you have your like linguistic resources in place, you have good partners, language service providers that you can trust. At that point, it's really down to the product, according to me. So having like a product-led strategy, it's really what, makes you successful. You now have all the tools and the processes to create a really beautiful, meaningful product for these users all over the world. Basically, that's the time to make sure that you're really refining your product, that your product is really, really resonates to local audiences. And that's a win in itself. After you don't have to do anything. Like it's the product that does it for you, basically.
And how did you measure the success and impact of your localization program throughout these various stages of scaling?
Yeah, measurement always a tricky one.
I know. That's a tough question. I know.
Yeah. No, but to be honest with you, I have probably a bit of an unpopular opinion about it. But this is what I think. Yes, there are ways that you can count things in numbers. There are ways that you can measure the quality of your translations, the cost efficiency of, your investments, how many internationalization bugs you are resolving every month. Those are all good metrics that definitely helps kind of like understand the health of your localization function. So I'm not saying that to overlook them, and I'm not saying not to consider them. They're all really, really good factors that determine how well the localization function is doing, and therefore how well, your international product or service is doing. But the real metric for me, like the most meaningful one to me, is the level of influence that the localization team has on the overall global strategy of the company, basically. Once you start sitting at the right table with having the right conversations, like early on, when you see that people from all across different stakeholders and different teams consider localization early on during the planning stage or come to you for basically you act as a consultant within your company, that's the real success. I think the level of influence and being able to really influence high strategic decision making when it comes to how you are presenting your product or your service internationally, I think that's the biggest win.
Yeah, I agree. When we talked as well with other guests as well about like moving, let's say, to the left, like getting into the early stage of product development, being involved, and that makes things easier. On one hand, makes things easier down the line to everybody, not just localization, like design, development, everybody. Yeah. You don't have to rework things just because it was flagged at the ideation stage or at the very beginning. And on the other hand, it allows to create a product that is really international, so you can resonate and engage people everywhere and not just focus on the, let's say, the initial domestic market where it was born from. So that's absolutely, I completely agree. I think it's like, it must be satisfying as well when you see like people going from not having any idea what localization is to, actually it's quite relevant and important, and it helps shape the direction of the company overall.
Yeah. And then you have the backlash where everybody now starts to reach out to you. Does this resonate well in this country? Is this color the right color? Like everybody's all of a sudden starts coming to you for advice. But as long as localization is not an afterthought, then like you said, basically the earliest on in the process is considered, the better it is. Also like the process is better streamlined, and eventually what trickles down at the user level, it's already very thoughtful and already like keeps in mind users from all over the world from the beginning stage, from the conceptual stage, basically at concept level. And not only when it comes to, okay, let's translate it in this language as well.
Yeah, especially because usually you don't have much time to go back and change other things when you're at the very end of the long process. Yeah.
Definitely no manipulation allowed there.
Looking back on your experience managing a localization program at a major tech company, you have a lot of experience now. What advice would you give to your past self when you were just starting out? Maybe something that you wish you'd known beforehand, or something you learned and you think it will be valuable?
Yeah. So I think no one size fits all is a good piece of advice, I think, because I've done things in a different way in the past with a different team. And then, things changed all of a sudden. And then I was there building a brand new team with brand new people. I don't believe, and again, unpopular opinion probably, I don't believe in you don't change a winning team. There's always a way for things to be different and innovative, think in a creative way. So try to avoid tunnel vision, I guess. That's a good piece of advice. I know that when things are really well, are operating really well, ideally, you don't want to disrupt and change things. That's not what I mean. I don't mean that like people are disposable and you change people in your teams. I don't mean that you want to go and mess up with a process that works really well, with a well-operating partnership or anything like that. But don't get too comfortable. Don't try not to get, tunnel vision. So especially nowadays where we're bombarded with new technical solutions and AI offers left and right and center, it can get overwhelming, but it's also really good, I think, to always keep kind of an eye out for how can you innovate? How can you do things in a creative way, in a different way? And yeah, for example, even when I rebuilt the team and there were brand new people joining that I've never worked with, that had a total different experience from mine. No amount of experience or seniority means that you can't do things in a different way, in a fresh way. I loved it when the new people in my team was bringing all these bringing all these new fresh perspectives, new way of doing things. So yeah, definitely avoid tunnel vision and just keep your mind fresh and curious, stay curious and keep an open mind on all the different inputs that you can have. And then maybe another piece of advice that I would give to my younger self is to build and foster a community outside of work of like-minded localization people, like-minded other people working in the tech or in a similar field of product or services that you work in outside of your own one, so that you can keep sharing notes and compare, what you're doing, and just again to keep on continuously learning and continuously improving the way that you do things. I think community is so important, just in general, and even at work, in your career environment, communities can be very, very helpful.
I really like this piece of advice because, and localization brings together so many disciplines, touches so many different, let's say, departments, and the way things are done in a different department might give you an idea of the way somebody goes about something. It's a completely different perspective. It's always good. And it helps getting out, I think, of that tunnel vision that you were saying. You're not always being just localization. You get in touch with other people. You understand why they do things in a certain way and how you can meet each other midway maybe sometimes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. You keep on inspiring each other, basically.
Yeah. Actually, yeah. And that's also why I think it makes localization really interesting. Yeah. It never gets really boring, to be honest.
No doubt. Yes.
It's very dynamic. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so I think that's all for today. And thank you so much for joining us on the Multilingual Content Podcast.
Of course. Thank you for having me. I hope this was helpful. And yeah, I had a lot of fun. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thanks for joining us today. The Multilingual Content Podcast is powered by Undertow. We help companies translate their content into results. Get in touch if you want to know more. And if you enjoyed today's episode, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss any new episode. See you next time.